Days have truly changed for Pokemon after Generation 8's Sword and Shield. For years and years we would get a third game in a generation that would usually improve or develop upon the original release. Sometimes we even got lucky and got 2 games released at the same time, with the unfortunate exception of Pokemon Z. That's lost in the abyss and will never be recovered. Pokemon has had quite a paradigm shift since then, and has now started to fit into the newer age of gaming that has emerged over the last decade, with a move towards DLC releases for each generation. The introduction of DLC allows developers of Pokemon to add additional content, such as a new region, old Pokemon, and new Pokemon. Whether you're a fan of this shift towards DLC that fits into the more mainstream idea of video games nowadays, the nature of the beast has fully changed, and the concept of content being released this way is not going to slow down anytime soon. Personally for myself, as long as it's not something that's created beforehand, like locking a character behind a special edition in order to force you to pay more money, then I'm fine with it. Naturally, sometimes ideas can formulate at the end or even after a full release. So as long as it's not intentionally kept behind with an arrogant attempt to try to force fans to pay an extra amount of money, then that's fine in my opinion. What category does the DLC of Pokemon fall in? Well, it's hard to tell how far in advance this was planned. We already knew of Paradox versions of Suicune and Virizion, as they actually appear as sketches in the original game, and the intention is for the legendary trios that these both belong to appear in the second DLC, the Indigo disc. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet has received a lot of criticism for what seemed to be a noticeable trend of quality falling below the standard that should be expected from a Pokemon game. On the Nintendo Switch, with games that are run such as the Legend of Zelda games, widely thought to be some of the best ever released, Pokemon's bugs and run issues due to a combination of resource management and time constraints have currently left a bit of a bitter taste in the mouth of some fans. With a DLC drop that includes an update, there's a hope that the DLC can provide a bit of a lift to the generation. That has definitely so far split the fanbase in terms of opinion. How well does the first DLC of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet do? Well, let's find out. So for a little background on the Teal Mask without giving away too much of the story, the player ventures on a school trip, kinda like one of those that you see in an anime but this time for Pokemon. Heading to Kitakami, which is a great mountain region, your trip coincides with a famous festival held during that season, and as such the area is bustling. You spend your time unraveling the mysteries and the wonders of the area, based on the folklores of the past, with a focus on the Loyal Trio and Ogerpon, as well as introducing no doubt some future important characters, including both Carmine and Kieran, who are from the Blueberry Academy, which will be the main focus of the second DLC, the Indigo disc. We get to explore a whole new land, which features a lot of returning Pokemon on a wonderful new map that is seemingly far away from the Paldea region. As Dexit is still in play, naturally a lot of Pokemon were not in the release of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and thus with the release of the Teal Mask, a multitude of Pokemon will be returning, allowing for their first access in Generation 9. To save your time and ears, instead of listening to the over 100 Pokemon that will be returning this generation, I will instead list some of my personal favourites that I'm glad to have back. The first is Empoleon, which is without a doubt my favourite starter of all time. After all, that Emperor Penguin is in my background. In fact, the trio of starters from Sinnoh will be back in Generation 9, which is good because as a 3, they make a strong case of being some of the best Pokemon starters in any generation ever. You actually get given an egg in the game, which randomly hatches into any of the starters, and I got quite lucky on my first try, because I managed to get the King. Granted, I wouldn't have been disappointed in any other ones, but it's good to get your favourite. One of the best fighting types is back with the Hitmon line, which means the best Hitmon is back. Which one of the 3 is the best? Comment down below whether you're Team Hitmonchan, Team Hitmonlee, or Team Hitmontop. Chandelure is also back, which means I have to make an obligatory Sia reference. Because I'm a fan? No, I just heard Chandelure on the radio every single day when I was like 17. It was literally on every radio station, so I feel like I have to remind everyone that it exists. We also have some new Pokemon debuting, including a new evolution for Applin named Diplin. Diplin seems to fit more like Applin's evolution. The other two seem to lose like the worm-like characteristics of it, whereas Diplin still seems to fit it. Speaking of fitting in, the convergent style of Pokemon that were introduced this generation have new additions in Poltergeist and Sinistcha. Not only did I struggle saying that one, it's quite interesting when you consider the fact that Poltergeist resembles and has more similarities with Sinistcha, but Sinistcha has more in common with Poltergeist. A nice little Uno reverse of the names. We have the Loyal Trio who make up a key element within the story, in Okidoki, Monkidori, and Pheasantipita, whose names sound awfully like Okie Dokie, Hunky Dory, and Serendipita. As the DLC has a heavy focus on folklore and history, naturally the three of them are in reference to a Japanese folklore about a boy who travelled alongside a talking dog, a monkey, and a pheasant in order to tackle a band of Onis. Naturally, our Teal Mask itself is based on an Oni, with it having a unique terrorization form. New moves are added including Syrup Bomb, a signature move for Applin's new evolution Diplin, with a multitude of new abilities including Toxic Chain for the Loyal 3, which means there's a likelihood that the target becomes badly poisoned, and Hospitality for Poltergeist, which restores a bit of health for an ally Pokemon when it enters battle. An ability that can be quite useful. Pokemon has definitely received a lot of flack in the past for its very rigid style format. Maps are usually not too open in terms of exploration. This was a big change with Scarlet and Violet, which allowed for exploration in any way you desired. Granted, no level scaling was introduced, which would have further exemplified the complete freedom you would have. Traditionally in updated versions such as remakes or third games, additional areas tend to be added as an extra layer of exploration. If you think of the Sevi Islands in Fire Red and Leaf Green, or the Battle Frontier in both Emerald and Platinum. These, however, are preconceived ideas written into the map with a set location. DLC actually allows for the additional areas to be added to explore that aren't included in the original map, and this opens so many doors. As a matter of fact, one of the big revelations in the Teal Mask is the revelation that we will be heading to the Unova region for the Indigo disc. I think taking this approach is probably the best route Pokemon could take, especially currently, to explore the Unova region. For those who haven't seen it, I originally did a video based on why you should not want a Unova remake. One of the main issues with remakes, as shown with Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which has generally been disliked more than any other, is a preconceived idea of how the game should be due to playing the original story. When Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl were introduced, there would have probably been a belief that it would have got the Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire treatment. While it necessarily didn't include Emerald, it included an entire new story that allowed you to get Deoxys. Due to Platinum existing, people have had a preconceived idea of how Diamond and Pearl's remakes were going to go, and it didn't really go the way people wanted it to. The story for Black and White still stands as probably one of the best ever made in the main Pokemon series. Naturally, a remake is always going to be widely anticipated. With the preconceived idea alongside issues such as resource management and time constraints, if things do go off course from what people are expecting, naturally it's going to lead to a lot of disappointed fans. That's not to say it's not possible to make a good remake. They have made multiple of them in the past, but a preconceived idea means you know exactly what to expect when going into it, and if it feels like it's not going the way you want it to, naturally the pitchforks will return. Having a new option of exploration is going to be incredibly beneficial to the franchise, as there's no expectation but only excitement at returning to a now beloved region. Multiple ideas that I've seen as a possibility for the return of the Unova region include a Legends game that's based around the original Dragon, Pokemon Black and White 3, a port, but I think this is a fair and reasonable point to be excited about. Imagine telling people that back in 2010, when Generation 5 was the devil for not allowing you to use Charizard or Pikachu, as every Pokemon in the entire region was new. With over 100 returning Pokemon to the franchise for Generation 9 via the Teal Mask, a bunch of Pokemon people have probably been waiting for are now back. Now naturally with Dexit, which I say this every time the word's said, but it completely haunts me because I live in Britain. Anyways, people will be thinking all the Pokemon should just be available from the beginning, and the unfortunate problem with that is due to the amount of Pokemon now, over 1,000 actually, that is a logistical nightmare. We've already discussed time constraints and resource management being a legitimate issue in the creation of Pokemon games. With the rate Game Freak want to create these games and content for Pokemon, something has to be sacrificed in order to meet those deadlines. Every Pokemon being available from minute 1 is something that's going to have to give way with that. Am I defending Dexit as a concept? No, of course not. I think in an ideal world, every Pokemon should be available in every Pokemon game, whether it's split across 2 games per console, and the DLCs, however they want to work it. But the problem is it's simply a logistical nightmare to create. And when you already have issues with resource management and time constraints, you're going to have to make sacrifices. Anyways, it's good to have a lot more Pokemon back, and hopefully with the Indigo disc around the corner we can get even more available soon. Now, are the additions and returning Pokemon to the series enough to keep people happy? Well, the thing is, Pokemon games cannot keep everyone happy anymore. The fanbase Pokemon now has is incredibly mixed, and the franchise in general is almost like its own money printing machine. Pokemon has simply become too big now. and it's way too full to meet the expectations of every fan of the series. This year is 27 years since the release of the first games back in Japan, all the way back in 1996. I myself have never lived in a time or era where Pokemon has not existed in some format. If you walk into any store, sometimes no matter the store, there's a likelihood there's some form of Pokemon merchandise being sold there. Obviously your toy and game stores will have it, but then I've seen stationery stores that have full section of Pokemon cards you can purchase. Your local supermarkets might sell clothes with Pokemon references on them. Heck, I've seen like random stores selling Pokemon cups. You know, like the cute ones that have like Pikachu's ears, etc. The franchise is an immense commodity in the world, and as such it has fans in many different ages. What I want from the series is vastly different from what somebody in their mid-30s playing Pokemon wants. The same as somebody who's in their early teens wants a particularly different output than someone who's 8 years of age. Issues with satisfaction in the franchise have existed since it began. Heck, go look at some of the old forums back from 2003 that have problems with Ruby and Sapphire. With the seemingly rushed releases of the series that have caused a lot of bugs, though let's be honest, Pokemon has never really hit the mark with avoiding bugs and glitches. I mean, missing though guys? Generation 1 is just built on bugs, hence you can finish the game in like 5 minutes. The reality is some people want the game to be released as soon as possible, so they will pester and ask for it to be released. Some would rather the game and DLC take as long as possible to release to be as polished as possible. Some would rather time be taken, but not have to wait 10 plus years for a game like any GTA fan has been doing for a while now. The DLC is not going to please everyone, just like how Pokemon can't please everyone anymore. In terms of the main series game, it's actually too big and earns too much money now. You can't keep all the fans and younger fans in tandem with each other, and make both happy. You might think some franchises hit this on the mark, which they do, but Pokemon as a franchise in terms of revenue is far above anything else close to it. Take the video I already mentioned about wanting a Gen 5 remake. The comments have ranged from asking for a Gen 5 remake so they can play it on the Switch, to wanting a Legends type game. Some agreeing categorically do not want a Gen 5 remake. Some want it to be ported. Some get annoyed that you're taking the previous remake done poorly and use that as the basis for your video. Oh wait, that one's just targeted at me. It's not a sport where you're aiming to win. It's about personal satisfaction from the franchise. But while Pokemon can't please everybody, as a minimum we can at least expect as a consumer that the franchise is moving in a positive direction. And with the move towards DLC instead of a third game, I do think this is a positive move for the franchise as a whole. Sword and Shield's DLC really positively improved Generation 8's overall quality as a product. The move towards it with Generation 8 has generally been seen as a positive inclusion for the franchise. Even if the plot was seen to be a little bit short, the addition made the games feel complete. It was really fun to have a third game. Pokemon Emerald and Pokemon Platinum are still two of my favourite ever Pokemon games. The excitement I had when I was young when I saw information regarding Pokemon Platinum, knowing how fun Pokemon Emerald was immeasurable. Especially back in the day when Pokemon games were released in Japan months before the West even got them. I'd be watching playthroughs in Japanese while not actually understanding what was going on, seeing the scene of Giratina and thinking, wow, I can't wait to play that. But times change. The options open to the game with DLC are definitely more than a third game. A Pokemon generation never necessarily has a long lifespan. Before you know it, the next generation is around the corner. But the ability with DLC and updates to add in such as a new Terra-type Pokemon, or new areas not coded into the original game, definitely allows the game to feel like they're getting an update. DLCs are only bad in my opinion if they're intentionally limiting something on release date, in an attempt to get more money from you. The main point I always go back to for this is the From Ashes DLC in Mass Effect 3. You had to either buy the special edition on release date or pay for that particular DLC in order to get a new party member. This content already exists in the game, but you have to pay for it in order to access it on release date. When that happens, I'm not a fan of it, as it's intentionally holding back content on release date when it's already been created and is already in the game. Now, we already knew of Suicune and Virizian's Paradox versions, but they weren't fully in fruition, and we don't know how long in the development cycle this was on release. It could have been something that was started on late on release, and instead of incorporating it fully, to hint at it that they've been working on it for the DLC, which interestingly enough, the three of them will be featured on the second DLC for the Indigo Mask. It seems as though the build to the next DLC is going to be big. With us returning to Unova via DLC, that is a massive addition we have not seen beforehand, so I can only see this as a positive move. In my personal opinion, as standalone DLC, the Teal Mask has some positive aspects that definitely add to the generation. I think in general having a new area to explore, lore, and reintroducing over 100 Pokemon is a net positive for the series. However, it's important to once again note the performance rate of the game. This is still an issue the generation has as a whole. There was definitely a hope that with the introduction of the DLC that we would fix the problems that the game's frame rate and performance issues have, and it doesn't, at least in my opinion. Is it worth the price tag? Well, if it was bought on its own, I think that's questionable. There's some nice new additions and returns, but I don't feel it's enough to warrant being a DLC on its own. Hence, it's been packaged with the Indigo disc, which feels like it's building towards, as you need to complete the game and the Teal Mask for the Indigo disc DLC, and the fact you meet someone from the Academy too. I feel like that's the general objective of the Teal Mask. Some setup. Even in the first 20 to 25 minutes of the game, there are multiple references to the next DLC, including the main Pokemon from the Indigo disc, the teacher from the Blueberry Academy, Carmine and Kieran being attendees of the school, strengthening the bond between your school, whichever version you're playing, and the Blueberry Academy. It feels like we are building up to the next DLC. With the revelation that the Blueberry Academy is in Unova, meaning for the first time in over a decade we will be heading back to that region, it very much opens the door and possibilities of what's to come. Are we going to tackle the gyms when we're in the Unova region? Are we going to get more Unova region games off the back of it? Who knows, honestly. I am personally quite glad we are taking this route to reintroduce Unova to the masses. I quite enjoyed Generation 5, and the possibilities that the second DLC have, I think, are very positive. The Teal Mask is a nice little addition of content to the game, but I think the important thing is that the Indigo disc DLC really hits the mark, in order to build on the hype that the Teal Mask has given it. What do you guys think of the Teal Mask so far? I would love to hear your opinions in the comments below. Make sure to like and also hit that subscribe button. You'd be surprised, but a lot of people who watch my content are not actually subscribed to the channel. Make sure to stay tuned for more Pokemon content. Pokemon 151 is out soon, so I'll be definitely doing some shorts or some main videos on it, and I will definitely be covering the Indigo disc when it eventually comes out later on this year. See you next time, guys.